going to recap the 2026 national championship game between Indiana and Miami that happened a few days ago. And then we're going to dive into some transfer portal news and highlights. So, Kevin, let's get started on this national championship game.
So I thought it was a really, really well played game. Now, I know some people will watch it and say it was boring for 2 or 3 quarters, but we talked about going into the game how important the line of scrimmage was, and how much if you just wanted to watch and be entertained, let the line of scrimmage play entertain you. And to me, that's I watched a lot of that during the game, and those both those teams' line of scrimmage really fought. They fought hard and sure, it was sloppy at times, only because one play Indiana might get the best of Miami's at the line of scrimmage, and the next play vice versa. So that made the game kind of spotty to watch, but it was really high level at the line of scrimmage. And as you got into the fourth quarter, the overall execution got better across the board. But really, a competitive game. It could have been won by either team. Um, it kind of went like we talked about the flow going into the game. We kind of thought that it might start out slow, um, with Miami trying to, you know, hold possession and that kind of stuff. But and then as it got into the game, it kind of flowed better. I will tell you the two things that I thought that cost Miami the game was one, third down conversions for them. I think they were like 3 out of 11, and they've been 55% in the playoffs. So their third down conversion offense was not very good, and I think a lot of that tied to what I'm also about to say. They were very predictable in the first half. They mixed it up in the second half. First half, they were 90% run on first down, and then pass. Uh, and I think they did a much better job in the second half of passing the ball on first down, running it on second. The long touchdown run they had was a stretch play on second down. But Indiana really got in a defensive rhythm in that first half, dropping eight. They would defend the run, and Miami was successful running the ball out on first down, but they'd end up second, six, second, and five, and then they'd throw it two times. And Indiana was very effective dropping eight into coverage, and I think that I never really thought Miami would attack that very well until finally in the second half they decided, well, we're going to run on second down some too, if you're going to drop eight all the time. But I thought, the coaching job that Indiana did by doing that, I think helped with the win. But really a competitive game. Sweets, what's your thoughts?
A great game, first of all. Went about the way we expected and was decided how we talked about. We talked about before the game how special teams, special teams and turnovers were going to dictate how the game ended. Well, special teams got Indiana a blocked punt touchdown, and the game was ended on an interception by Beck in Indiana territory, where they could have went ahead and won the game. So that's big. Listen, if Miami doesn't get that punt blocked, maybe they gets off a good punt, that changes everything. So those little things like that end up coming back to bite you. As far as quarterback play goes, both Mendoza and Beck were solid. Beck didn't have an awful game. Beck, as a matter of fact, statistically, Beck was better than Mendoza. Beck was 19 for 32 for 232, had one touchdown and that pick at the end of the game. Whereas Mendoza was 16 of 27 for a buck 86 and one rushing TD. So, it wasn't like he had this great game out playing. It was just a matter of Indiana making those few plays when they needed to get the win. I think it was just as simple as that. Hats off to Cristobal too. He coached a pretty good game. There were some things he could have done differently. I think offensively, I agree with that, Kev, on the especially early in the game. But they adjusted in the second half and had a little more success. Want to shout out both teams. Great game. Congrats to Indiana. I'm glad they won. Neat to see. And we'll see if Signetti can hit that pot of gold for the third time in a row in the transfer portal. That'd be very interesting to see. And to segue into that, DMAC, let's talk about the transfer portal, buddy. What do you have for thoughts on that right now?
Yeah, so I want to look at the numbers real quick. I know last week I mentioned the amount of players who were still available, and you are still sitting at about 34% of players from the D1 level who entered their name in are still out there. And so as we see schools start to enroll, guys locking in where they're going, you're going to see a lot of guys whose college football career, at least at the D1 level, is over, in a pursuit to find more playing time at a higher level within D1. Yeah, the chase for money, poor mentoring from family members or agents or people you're close to. So I don't know where it ended last year, but I still think it's going to be at least 25%, if not higher, of kids who don't have a place to go. Now, your elite talent's always going to have a place to go. Man, there are so many kids who are still talented, but you look at a school like LSU has already filled probably 92 to 95 of their 105 roster spots. And there's other teams in the SEC who are very similar to that. So, tough time to be a college kid and be advised by the wrong people in your life right now is probably my biggest takeaway. I'm not going to dive in too much on specific players or team wins right now, but what are your thoughts, Sweets?
Yeah, it's there are a lot of these kids who got a bunch of really bad advice from agents, homies, family, people. It's sad to see that a lot of these 18, 19-year-old kids are now going to be the breadwinners for their family. In trying to get this NIL money, so it's going to become a yearly chase unless the rules change for who can give me the most right now. Used to be a kid wanted to go somewhere because he wanted to develop himself for a possible shot at the NFL, get an education, and try to play and win football. Now it's just who can give me the most money right now, and once I got that, who can give me the most money next year. That's it's been wild to watch. Hopefully somebody will step in and change the rules and get us on a track to something that's more feasible and something that can actually work long term, because the transfer portal and the way it works with the money and stuff right now this isn't a long term fix. This is something that's only going to last for a short period of time, with because the schools just can't afford to throw out 30-40 million dollars for their college football team's payrolls. And to be competitive, you're going to have to get in that area. Now, I don't know what Indiana spent in the portal the last 2 years. I don't think it was 30 million, but it was a sizable sum, and they spent more this year because they've got that reputation now. So, and they've got more donors jumping into that donation pool with the Mark Cubans and stuff. So they're going to be able to go and spend more in the portal. But it's not a long term fix. It's just it's what can you do for me now? And that's where NIL is. Hopefully that comes in and changes. Kev, what are your thoughts on it?
I just want to hit on a couple of recent things in the portal. You have the Darian Mensah saga that's playing out. Will he end up at Miami? I think he does. I think him and Mensah and Duke obviously will have to settle their money piece and how that flows. But I do think he ends up at Miami. And you have a big move there that happened too with Emory Williams, who their OC likes at Miami. He entered the portal. So I think that's some big opportunity and news there. And then I think, you have to just kind of continue to look at strategically. You mentioned Indiana. The interesting thing to me in Indiana this year is they only have 9 going out and they have 15 coming in. So, yes, they lost a lot of experience. They lost a lot of older players, but they also have a lot of experience coming back in that two deep. Maybe not in that starter group, but that in that two deep group. And I tie that to what LSU's doing. I think it's so LSU. I think it's right around 41 players. High 30s have 2 years remaining. So 34, 35 out of that 40, 41 have 2 years remaining. So I think another thing you've got to look at in these schools is the strategy that they're using when they go out and they get people. Are you building a roster and you're trying to also layer some, tenure in that? It's where you've got 2 years. You're taking productivity. You're not taking freshmen where you're just looking at potential. You're saying, okay, I want this junior that's been productive, but he also has 2 years left. I think you're starting to see a lot of teams, look at it like that. I know Oklahoma State has done that too. I think several teams that are doing that. Again, not just going out for that senior that's got 1 year left. In some instances, when that one player puts you over the top, again, like in Indiana with Josh Hoover, the quarterback from TCU, who has 1 year left, like they did with Mendoza this year. I certainly think that plays, but I also think it's interesting that you're going to see teams look for that, players that have 2 years left to build depth and keep some stability in the roster as they get into next year. It's really interesting to see what teams and what not. It's not just teams; it's coaches that have the GM, that have the coaching staff, that there's total alignment in how they work and move the portal.
D-Mac, any more thoughts?
I know we complain about the NCAA a lot on this show. I'm gonna make a quick basketball comment before we stay on football. But man, what is going on in college basketball where you get guys who play 2 years of college hoops, go and play a couple years in the G League, and then this weekend they're playing a competitive SEC game. Like, I know the NCAA says they're not allowing them, but really all you need as a university is an alumnus judge who can grant in your favor. Like we'll likely see with Trinidad here pretty soon being granted another year by an Ole Miss alum judge. Bediako, I don't know who ruled on the case, but if I had to guess, it would be a Crimson Tide alum.
It was a judge in Alabama.
Yeah.
And that is not a joke. It was a judge in Alabama.
Yeah, and we know no Auburn fans go to law school, so we're right back at Alabama there. Yeah, it just, at some point things have got to change both on the NIL, the eligibility. What's to prevent, a hotshot kid who goes straight to the majors or to the minor leagues in baseball and decides, man, this is not the living condition I want. I'm hitting 330 in the minors. I can go to the pros in a couple years, or I can go make millions now playing college baseball and then go to the pros a couple years from now. It's a very slippery slope that it seems like every day we find a way to slide farther down. As
It's
a league.
The NCAA has no backbone in this.
Yeah.
They have the ability to establish some consistency. A judge can grant that injunction and say that they should let them play, and the NCAA can come right back because they've had that standard. They've had the standard once you declare to go into the pros that you're out of eligibility. That you lose your eligibility at that point. The NCAA has the ability to. Hold on just a minute here.
It's the red button. Slide it. The red one.
There we go. Let's turn that off. I don't even know. The NCAA has the ability to say, okay, he plays, you're ineligible. You can't you can't play in the NCAA tournament. It's
You
as
know,
simple as that.
let's just face it, the NCAA is a feckless organization that is only in it to line the pockets of, first of all, their organization, because there are a lot of people in that organization that are making a lot of money to do nothing. It's a pseudo Ponzi scheme with what they've got running here, because these member schools are paying all this money into the NCAA for guidance and leadership and rules and all this stuff, and then the NCAA repays them by saying, "Well, we really have these rules, but you don't have to follow them. They're just kind of they're more of a guideline that we'd like you to follow." I mean, at that point, what use is there having it? We had talked about it a few weeks ago, Kev. That, they need to have call the NCAA. I don't care what you call it, but get somebody in there like a Nick Saban, somebody who's respected, who people will listen to, and who can bring together a group of people that will sit down in a room and hammer this out and work something out that's equitable for everybody. It sickens me to see all these people, in different social media forums and stuff, talking about, well, they're the football players, they're making all the money, they should get all the money. That's not how college works. Okay, if you want to do that, go be a pro. But for colleges are institutions that the college takes care of itself. So the football will pay for a few other sports. Different majors will help pay for other majors. More popular ones will get money invested back into the school that will help ones that aren't quite as popular. Things like that, and that's what college is about. It's not about supporting your family. You all right? Maybe you ought to answer that one. Somebody needs you. In any case, yeah, it's silly to keep pretending that these athletes are amateurs and stuff. I mean, college football has made more millionaires in the past few years than most businesses have, because of how many kids are getting paid seven figures now, and it's just, so it's got to come back to something. I thought NIL was going to be great because it was supposed to be about, hey, the way they fed it to us was, we're going to give these kids the opportunity to make money off their name, image, and likeness, so they can do some commercial spots and they can make a little money. They can have some card signings and stuff like that. It went from that. It lasted one day and then went straight to pay for play, and now it's become, we'll give you 6 million. What's the kid? What is his name, image, and likeness doing to earn that 6 million? I mean, nothing. It's the fact that they're really good football players and they're not going to do shit but play football for that money. That's not what NIL was designed for. And, it's not going to be addressed by the NCAA. So until somebody comes in and fixes it, we're going to keep living with this. DMAC?
Yeah, it's it's just an arms race of millionaires and billionaires, who can stroke the biggest check. We're LSU fans, and obviously right now it's working in our favor. But so I guess as long as those are the rules, I'm happy LSU's capitalizing on it. But man, it takes a lot of the fun out of the game too.
Don't you think, again, you talk about this NBA stuff and these guys, one from Baylor and one from Alabama coming back. Coaches, there's other coaches that are already coming out totally against this. I think by the time you get closer to the tournament, I just think I think you're going to have some people with some coaches that really take a strong stance, and it's going to create some havoc within it.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so. I mean, if you've left and made money in that sport as a professional athlete, you don't get a second bite at that college apple. I mean, these guys like a Chris Winkie, who played, whatever, 10 years of minor league ball and then came back when he was 30 to play NCAA football. Well, it kind of sucks because, a 30-year-old dude shouldn't be playing college football. It was part of the rules. Getting better at that. It was part of the rules, and it was legal. So, I mean, it's not part of the rules for these kids to go play whatever that individual sport is, basketball, football, baseball, get paid, not be as successful as you like, and then go back to college to give that another try to get paid again. That's not what the rule is for. The fact that the NCAA has let it happen, it just shows you that they're 100% useless. They're the eunuchs of college sports. It's awful to watch. Go ahead, DMAC.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the quarterback from Florida State years ago. Do you remember? We had Zach von Rosenberg, the punter,
Punter,
who had signed, I think, with the Pirates out of high
right?
school. So and I'm all for that. A kid, dual sport athlete, can't make it. Obviously, you can't go back. But if you think about it, imagine if you could have had Zach von Rosenberg, who was still a good pitcher but didn't pan out in the majors, come back to LSU at 26.
Yeah,
It just I don't
exactly.
understand how it can happen in basketball the way it has.
Yeah. And have either of you guys seen a response from the NCAA that justifies it or anything, or it's just basically been they're doing it and we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah,
I haven't
yeah,
seen
just
word one
crickets,
from the
nothing.
NCAA.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just go ahead.
their statement a couple weeks ago was, we don't allow guys who have signed NBA or two-way contracts to play in our leagues.
Mhm.
Now, no, nothing since
Yeah,
then.
Alabama said that's nice. We're going to put him out on the court. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
He's playing. What have they done about it? Nothing.
Well, Baylor got it all started, but again, to me, the NCAA, the answer is you want to play, fine. You win those games, fine. NCAA tournament time, you're ineligible.
Yeah, I mean, that would, I just, I disagree with that. I just think you tell them these are rules and this is what they've been. And, he had his chance to play college ball. He went to the league, he failed. Sorry, go become an insurance salesman, go do something else. But college basketball isn't here for you because you played it professionally already. So, it's not going to happen, but it's how it should be. Like I said, I'm just what's the next move on the NCAA's, because like you said, Kev, there are going to be coaches that come out against us, and when's it going to be that a kid that gets drafted that doesn't like his draft status in the NFL says, you know what, I'm going to come back now. He hasn't been paid any money, but still declared, drafted, and once you've done that, you've already got money from agents and all that stuff. Let's not kid ourselves. So it's kind of silly. It's kind of silly. Kev, you're being chuckled at by someone named Teresa. I don't know that person.
He's a Tennessee fan, it looks like.
All I know is again, the NCAA could keep them out. They could if you play an ineligible player in the past, you couldn't play in postseason. It's as simple as that. Just stay to it.
I mean,
If you allow it, now you open Pandora's box. Everybody wants to do it. There's just no reason for that. Then the next thing you know, Jimmy, the big donor, says, okay, I want you to come play. We'll have LeBron finally play a year of college basketball next year because somebody will pay him $15 million. Kentucky.
You get LeBron and Bronny on the same court.
There you go.
There you go. They win a championship together. Can't do it with the Lakers, but they'll do it in college.
Yeah, you could do it with the Wildcats.
So let's talk impact transfers into the SEC. On the offensive side of the ball, who do you guys think has the potential to be the biggest impact transfer into the SEC?
I mean, Levitt is the number one guy in the portal overall. So if he's healthy, by the know-it-alls ideas, it's him. I think so, but I could see somebody like a Seton, coming in if he came to an SEC team having a dominant year at left tackle, being a top 5 pick, and if he was able to do that, then I would say outside of somebody coming in and winning a Heisman like Mendoza did at Indiana last year, that'd be a tough one to beat out for what they accomplished. Do you have anybody in mind?
I really like the running back. Well, I guess Texas got two really good running backs, but I think Hollywood Smothers has a really good chance to, compete for like running back of the year in the SEC. With the weapons they already have on the offense. Obviously, they added Cam Coleman, who was an already SEC guy, but I think he has a chance to have a really big impact. They were extremely talented in the running back room at Texas last year, but never really fully put it together due to some injuries. So I think this revamped running back room for Texas has a ton of potential.
I think you got to look at not just the player, but the coach, the situation, and everything. And we've talked in the past about how there's no better quarterback coach than Kiffin, and he's proved it. I mean, year after year after year. When was the last time he had bad quarterback play? It's not there. So I go back to Levitt. I think you got to go Levitt. You put a high quality talent with a quarterback coach like Lane Kiffin and as good as he does with offense, and not just them. Look at how the playoffs played out. Charlie Weiss Jr. Did a really good job going back to Ole Miss and calling playoff games for them. So I mean, how could you not say on the front side if you were taking odds and you were going to lay a lot of money on a guy having a great season, you would have to bet on Levitt. I think the second one that I would say, just pure offense, just on the offensive side, would not be someone that's coming into the SEC, but that went SEC to SEC, and that would be Cam Coleman at Texas, simply because the way Arch Manning finished the year, Sark in that offense, and again, Coleman's upside. So I think those two would be the immediate dominant offensive players that I would look for to really have a huge impact. Where would we go defense? Who wants to
So
take?
I would go with a kid who was kind of forced out of his last school. They upgraded the defensive end position, and he ended up at LSU. I'm going Princewell as the potential biggest impact. If you read Ole Miss message boards, they got three guys better than Princewell. But I think he's maybe a little annoyed with some of those statements. He's gonna come in ready to play, coming off what 9 sacks last year. And I think the impact that he can provide at LSU is, Patrick Payton underperformed a little bit. Jack Pyburn was more of a run defensive end. So if LSU can really get after the quarterback with good defensive ends and not have to bring seven guys, that's going to really set up the back end of LSU's defense. But I think it starts with the new defensive end in the SEC here.
I could buy that, DMAC, and especially because when you look at it, I mean, LSU's defensive ends didn't have great seasons last year. Part of that was because Gooden got hurt and stayed hurt a lot of the time, as well as Weeks. And when you have two of your better defensive players, especially two guys that are right in the middle of it all, and you lose those guys, that frees up the offense to not have to worry about, we don't have to worry about a double coming from the middle. We don't have to worry about the A gap. We trust our interior linemen against these backup players, so we can cheat out here on the edge and make sure that we're protected out there. I think, coming back and being healthy in the middle, and if Weeks is healthy, I think that frees up LSU's outside guys to have a lot bigger impact. And I think that Prince is going to feast off of that. And, I could see him getting, a dozen plus sacks next year if everybody's able to stay healthy. That's a good call. Kev?
I think one that you got to look at, just pure talent, is Chaz Coleman that's going to Tennessee. He was very highly rated from an edge perspective. And then I think another player that you got to look at that a team has to have this guy perform well, and that's Devin Tompkins, that transferring from USC to Alabama. Alabama loses a lot on their front, so they need a guy like Tompkins. He has to be an impact player for them. So I would say those two would be the ones that I would be interested outside of the ones that you guys have already mentioned um, in the SEC. But when you look, and let me tell you another guy that I think is an interesting player from a portal standpoint is Michael Boro going from Florida to Ole Miss. Ole Miss has Eccles on their defensive line at tackle. Outside of him, with what they lost on the edge, they lost a lot on the edge, and so they need a guy like Boro to be a really good defensive tackle to pair along with Eccles. DMAC, you mentioned Ole Miss is certainly chirping that those three defensive ends are better than Prince, but they also lost Womack, and the production of those guys is not very good. The three that you got, Renaud, Maldonado, I think it is, that came from UNLV. I can't remember exactly, but their production is not that strong. And again, if I'm at UNLV, 9 sacks at UNLV, I'm not saying that's what he had, would transition to about 3 or 4 sacks in the SEC when you just look at the talent they're played against. Renaud that played at Alabama, he's got a half a sack in 2 years. So I don't think they could count on them. But anyhow, Chaz Coleman, Devin Tompkins would be two guys that I think to watch on the defensive side.
And losses too. Some of the losses I look at, like Quay Russaw going from Alabama to Ohio State. That's that's an enormous loss on that side of the ball for Alabama. We had talked about it offline, but just really quickly, I could see Alabama being an 8-4 team really easily next year. I don't know what their schedule looks like, but they lost a ton of talent, and they haven't replaced it with what appears to be equitable talent. We'll see how well Kalen DeBoer is able to. We'll get a better judgment on his evaluation and that staff's development ability this season, because they had to replace a lot with what is deemed to be lesser talent by the experts. So if you buy into that stuff, Alabama could be in for a little bit of a rough ride this year.
They traditionally have had, 8, 10 guys that are going to be drafted every year for 15 years. If you look at that roster that they're going to have next year, they do not have 8 or 10 NFL draftees on that first that on their 2 deep. They just don't.
That's right, and it was cyclical too. Those 8 or 10, all obviously upperclassmen. They move along. You just plug in those next kids, and they come on and do the same thing. It's not happening like that for them right now. And like I said, especially when you lose somebody like a Russaw, and a couple years ago when they lost. God, I'm drawing a blank. Kev, we watched him play countless times. The kid that went to Ohio State, the safety. The best safety in the country. I can't remember.
They played running back and safety in high school both.
Yeah,
they won that state championship.
Yeah.
Yeah, Caleb. That's Caleb Downs.
Caleb Downs. Yeah. So that would have never happened under Saban. You're losing your top guys to other schools. Ohio State of all schools. Not that Ohio State's a bad school or anything, but like Saban said a while back, he said, "Listen, the reason why the northern schools are seeing such a great impact now that NIL is here is because you have to pay these southern kids money to go up there to play. Kids were just trying to escape that stuff to come down here to play." So I think there's a little something to that. And there's probably a little sour grapes on Saban's part too. But, if you've won 7 titles, you deserve it. So I couldn't complain. Another big pickup is I like the TJ Daugherty pickup from Ole Miss to LSU too. The kid played almost 1,000 snaps last year. Was by far the leader on Ole Miss's defense that just got to the semi. So I think he's somebody who hasn't been talked about as much, but could have a pretty sizable impact along with Weeks and Prince in that interior next season.
Another defensive back that I like that transferred SEC to SEC is Ricky Gibson from Tennessee. Went to Texas A&M. He was a little banged up the back half of the year. Man, he was one of my favorite corners outside of Delane, of course, to watch early on this season. So I think that's a huge pickup for A&M, and I hate to give them credit outside of Marcel Reed and KC Concepcion last season, but I like that pickup for him. He was a guy who, yeah, I know LSU is good at the corner room, but when I saw his name enter, he was a guy who I was like, man, I would not mind him, coming on board, but A&M got him. I don't think LSU even really reached out with how confident they feel in the corners room, and he's only 5'11 and a half, so he doesn't fit the build of an LSU DB either.
Neither did Tyrann Mathieu, but somehow he snuck in there and did okay, right? Another one I like that we haven't talked about is Jay Crawford, a kid from here in Georgia who went from Auburn to Ole Miss. He's going to do well at Ole Miss. That's a kid that you're going to see drafted in a year or two, and he hasn't been talked about as much, but he was a high 4-star cornerback coming out of high school, and did well enough to go get a pretty good lump sum check from Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. So that's another kid, Jay Crawford, to to keep your eye on for transfers who might surprise you doing well that haven't been talked about as much. Kev, who else do you have?
Well, again, your point there. I think Ole Miss did good in the secondary with Crawford. They also got a safety from Florida State. I think that's their best part of their portal acquisitions would be the secondary players that they picked up. And even though Auburn lost a lot, they picked up some good players on defense too, or some talent on defense. So, but they lost a lot.
Auburn lost a ton. I just going through it right. I'm like, God, he left too. And I was going down. I saw that that Kyan Lee left and is now at Tennessee. It's I mean, a lot of it is it's the Kevin Bacon thing, except for it's not 6 degrees of separation. It's like 2 with these SEC teams because a lot of them seem to have landed back in the SEC. I mean, it makes sense because these are the people who scouted them, who probably recruited them out of high school, and who are now getting a second bite at that apple. So they're coming in and making those changes, picking up those players that they didn't land the first time. We'll see how it works out for them.
I think. Go ahead.
I can't believe nobody's mentioned a linebacker that Ole Miss picked up in the portal here recently.
Farrelly from Clemson.
Yeah, Farrelly, man, that kid. The way Spirit Ben talks about him, they get the best linebacker in the country right there.
I mean, this
is I would not even
here.
I'm not even going to acknowledge that guy you mentioned there, D-Mac. That guy's been so wrong and all over the board. There's no point in even calling his name out.
D-Mac, I'm not going to say any names. It wasn't Kevin. But somebody sent me a picture of him and you, and y'all do look a little bit alike. Might be just red hair. Have you seen him? Spirit Ben?
I've only seen his interaction with Kiffin after the state game, as far as seeing his face.
I watched the when he lost it, last week in the on his podcast. He, it was about 20 minutes in, Kev, when he just, it all just came loose for him. It was it was funny, but it was it was just funny. I was going to say it was borderline sad, but it was just funny to see a grown man act that way over college football. But he's their problem, not ours. Their monkey, their circus. But somebody sent me that, and I was like, they both got red hair. D-Mac's not a douchebag like that.
I do want to talk about Farrelly for a second, though.
Let's do it.
Because how wild is it to enroll in a school, go to classes, and then re-enter the transfer portal when another team just throws some more cash at you. I've kind of haven't paid too much attention to that as it's gone on, but it blows my mind that we're in a position to where kids can be enrolled in school, going to a school after transferring to that school, and a week later they're going somewhere else.
It's just another, another notch in the NCAA's belt to say, look at us, we ain't doing shit.
We've been live for 40 minutes. We could go live for 40 hours easy, just pointing out all the problems with the NCAA. And if we can do it, there's got to be somebody in that building who can identify some of their problems and create a solution.
I would agree with that.
The identification is not their opportunity. You can't tell me they're not able to identify it. They're smart. But the ineptness of the solution is the key. And let's take 5 minutes and talk about this whole contract situation, because to me that's a big part of the portal and the mess is the inability to write effective contracts, which it looks like the Big Ten has gotten a little better with that because of what they went through a couple of years ago. And they've actually tied some contracts to where you can't just change schools by unenrolling and re-enrolling in another school. They have written that into some contracts and learned that. But look, collective bargaining has got to be part of this. And it's such a the NCAA does not want to go down that path at all. And you have one bill on the table legislation wise to try to fix this. And the NCAA keeps waiting for Congress to fix it. You have effective contracts in professional sports, and that's what we're dealing with right now, right? College sports are now professional sports. You're getting paid money. Collective bargaining is part of it at every other professional sport, and you have effective contracts. So why are we just dragging our feet because we don't want to give players the ability to negotiate revenue sharing? We don't want to give them that ability. So we're just going to let everything else just go to a mess. Whereas just bring collective bargaining into it, get an agreement. Basically, you're giving them the chance to be a union, call it what it is. But now you can be effective, and you can, once everybody agrees, then you can go forward versus this just mess that, you can't have contracts. Mensa, Miami's desperate, so they're going to throw $10 million and pull the quarterback from a guy last minute. He's playing at Duke until Friday, the last day of the portal, essentially, and now he's gone. There's got to be something done to fix the contractual side of this. Any thoughts?
No, I mean we've talked about it ad nauseum for months offline. It seems like the NCAA just doesn't have the guts to enforce their own rules, and so they're waiting for the government to come in and save them from themselves. It's not the government's job to do that. What they need to do is just get better leadership who's going to enforce what's already in effect. And if the teams don't like it, then boo hoo. I don't like a lot of I don't like driving 55 on the freeway when nobody's there, but the law says that's all I can do. So if I choose to break that law, then I choose to deal with consequences. There needs to be consequences for these teams that are blatantly breaking the rules that are in place that the NCAA refuses to enforce. I mean, I think it's that simple. DMAC?
Yeah, I think specifically to the Mensa saga here, man. Miami and Duke play each other this season. I can guarantee you, no matter how depleted Duke may seem, Manny Diaz is going to have that team ready to go up against the Hurricanes next year. Miami may have made it to the national championship game, but one thing Duke has that Miami doesn't this year is an ACC championship.
That's right. That's right. They do have those rings.
Well, are we going to see a trade basically like Tennessee and UCLA did last year, with Mensa going from Duke to Miami, does Emory Williams go from Miami to Duke?
I, I
I
could see it.
I did I read something or get something sent to me? I think that Williams is going to East Carolina.
Let me look. I know he entered the portal after the game Monday night. I did not
Let's
know if
see.
he's had a destination.
And he
I would think
he was ranked way down there, wasn't he?
there's people that actually feel good about him.
I'm not saying kids
He
don't got
has signed with East Carolina. He has signed with East Carolina. Wow, he moved quick.
Yeah, I thought, who's the I wonder who the OC is at East Carolina now, or the head coach.
Well, the previous OC is now at Ole Miss.
Yeah, I knew that. Let me see who their new coaching staff is. Blake Harrell is their head coach. Jordan Davis is their OC. Where was he before? He was at he was at North Texas this
Yep.
past year.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, listen, he headed up a good offense. I mean, I don't know how many
Yes.
people think it was him or the Oak State head coach now that was running that, but they had success. I don't think it's a bad hire at all.
Well, any last minute thoughts, Kevin?
No, I don't have any. The only thing I will say is, let's break these SEC teams down in a couple of days. Maybe go 8 teams one day and 8 teams the next day, and let's just do a breakdown of some portal rankings and maybe put a grade to them, A, B, C, and how we feel like they've done, what they've lost production wise, what they're going to gain production wise, and then maybe a preseason top 10.
Sounds good.
Yeah, my last thought will be we're 22 days to opening day in college baseball. So we're getting closer, less than 3 weeks away from, well, just over 3 weeks away from first pitch in Alex Box. So exciting times for baseball. Will the LSU Tigers go to Omaha again this year? Is a question we will answer for you guys soon as we break down baseball in the coming weeks as well. Anything sweets before we wrap up?
Now we'll also be diving into SEC basketball a little more as that's start. We're in league play now, and well into league play, and you're starting to see teams for what they are. So it's great that everybody in the SEC comes into January at 12-3 or better. But then you start having to play your league schedule, and it evens itself out. So we'll be covering that more, and just listen, be safe out there this weekend. If you're in the South, we're supposed to get, another one of those once in a lifetime storms that we seem to get almost yearly. So be careful out there and, tune in. Don't forget to tell people about it, subscribe and whatnot.